Welcome to episode 114 of the Necronama.com. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now. And sure, I have a giant open, gaping wound leaking out on the side of my face, but I feel fine. How you doing, Don?
I'm pretty good myself. I got the exterminator coming over in a little bit, so I'll feel a whole lot better then. And I'm Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of this podcast. And I'm itching just thinking about some of the scenes from this movie.
Joining us today, we have two guests who have been here before. Joshua Viola and Alvaro Zinos-Amaro are here. Welcome back to the show, guys.
Great to be here.
Thanks for having me. Oh, us, I should say, I guess. I need to share the space.
We had you on Pumpkinhead. We're aware of your ongoing war, so that wouldn't surprise me at all. But yeah, you guys did the Pumpkinhead episode. It's one of those that I've gone back and listened to. I was having a really bad day one day, and I was like, I know what will make me laugh, these two. And I legit went back and listened to it, and I encourage others to do the same, because even if you haven't seen Pumpkinhead, I think you'll really enjoy that episode just because you guys have such great chemistry together. So we are glad you're back. With that said, would you two like to fight over who gets to tell us about themselves first?
Josh, please. Be my guest.
Yeah, sure. What can I say about myself? I'm Josh Viola. Alvaro knows me as God, editor and owner of Hex Publishers, and I am a writer as well, an artist, and first and foremost, a movie buff. So thanks for asking us back. That was a lot of fun, the Pumpkinhead podcast. So I can't wait to see how this one goes.
And I'm Alvaro Zinos-Amaro. I do think of Josh as a god, but not necessarily in the pantheon that he believes. I'm a writer, reviewer, interviewer as well. And I think I should finally watch Pumpkinhead since we talked about it so much. No, I'm just kidding.
No one knew this episode was just a giant advertisement for that episode. No,
right. Yeah, let's just talk about Pumpkinhead again. I mean,
yeah. So, I mean, the best part, the little kid at the beginning. No, all right. So, Alvaro, why don't you jumpstart us here? Why'd you pick this film, man?
Well, leaving aside my profound, psychological issues and the absence of medication at the time that I needed to pick this, I think that I remember when I was reading the original novella by Nathan Ballingred, The Visible Filth. It came out from this very small, in this very small limited edition published by This Is Horror out in the UK. And I love novellas. I think Michael Wilson was the editor of this from the publisher. And I just remember having this moment, reading this, thinking, this is so weird and messed up. Why don't they ever adapt things like this into horror movies? And then a few years later, lo and behold, I found out that it was being made into a movie, and I watched it and no one else did. And I thought, well, that's not right. So I decided to share the gospel of the visible filth, aka wounds, and try to make converts of you all. I know I'm doomed to fail, but I thought I'd give it a shot.
Well, I'll respond to that first. You did not fail with me. There were a couple things I didn't overly care for, but overall, I really dug this movie. I mean, I adored probably 90% of this film.
I was talking to Alvaro last night, and I was like, because obviously he recommended this film, and he always has to one up us all. I was like, well, I'm gonna watch it the night before, make some notes, and he's like, oh, I already did, and then I'm gonna watch the the director's commentary or something on it. And I was like, did you read the novella? He's like, I did. So I'm assuming 16 times. And then I was thinking our last podcast, we had this good cop, bad cop scenario, which I think, but I've realized it's actually smart cop, stupid cop, and that's what makes this work, because his comments and commentary on these things are just so much more elevated, and I'm just the dumb uneducated viewer making. And as you can see, I'm just rambling on. So but I can't wait to hear his analysis on this thing.
That's very flattering. I'm super happy, by the way, that one of us has enjoyed this so far. 90% is a pretty high ratio. I did go back through the novella this morning again, and I've actually highlighted passages just so that we could all revel in the beautiful prose. But just so I don't forget to say this later, from a kind of writing nerd perspective or craft perspective, if you will, this story was republished in the collection Wounds, which is easy to find in print, and it has a couple of other great stories by the same writer, Nathan Ballengrid. And one of the things I noticed is that there are small textual differences. I actually compared the version of the novella in Wounds from the original This Is Horror version, and that was a lot of fun.
Were there any major plot shifts, or was it just like...
It's all craft stuff. Like an adjective changes, scene is three lines longer, 3 lines shorter, things like that. So it's really, really minor kind of polishing stuff.
Well, that's pretty cool. I definitely did not put that much time into this, so I appreciate that you did. So,
why would anyone?
I can't wait to hear too. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll chime in later on. Never mind.
All right. So, Don, have you seen this before?
I have not, only because I read the novella, then I contacted the production company to get some insight. Then I wrote some fan fiction on it, and I was like, all right, I've done this, so I've got to go ahead and watch the film now, because I don't want to be outdone. No, this was the first time I've seen it, and it reminded me, and of course we'll get to that part later, but it reminded me of a good number of films. And then just because I'm a glutton for punishment, I like to read comment sections, and sometimes Twitter feeds and things like that. And so I was just reading the reviews, and people were like, what the hell was this? I didn't understand anything that happened in the film. This is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. And then you have the polar opposite, where it's like, this is the most brilliant thing ever. The way they use this as a metaphor for this. And I just have to laugh at how polarizing some movies can be if you don't get what you expected to get out of the film.
Yeah, and I have to say that's a great point. That was part of the reason that I chose it, not just because there was a lot of mixed responses to it, but because I think it doesn't. I could see that it would be a film that would irritate a lot of viewers, particularly with the ending. Mm-hmm. And I think we can talk more about that. But I'm curious, had you heard about this before? Had anyone? You said it was on your list, James, right? But Don, were you aware that this thing existed?
I remember seeing the banner on Hulu before, but I didn't. It wasn't something that I was explicitly seeking out.
Right.
So I was aware of it.
I don't think it's fair. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no. What do you mean by not fair?
Well, I think that it being on my list isn't as fair, because it's on my list because Michael David Wilson brought it to my attention.
Oh, okay. So if we eliminate the actual one of the people that was involved in the creation of it, it wouldn't have.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I'd never heard of it before, and I try to keep an eye out for under the radar, horror flicks in general. So that was what was actually exciting, was to check out something I hadn't heard of, and truthfully, it was about as under the radar, honestly, as this whole for me the whole Army Hammer controversial nonsense that's going on. So I kind of discovered a lot when this movie was brought up to me.
Well, yeah, because when James and I were discussing, the film and I guess texting back and forth, not tweeting back and forth, but texting back and forth about the film, James was like, I can't remember anything he's been, or watching anything he's been in. So I had the same reaction. I was like, I don't remember anything. I mean, other than The Lone Ranger, because that was, a really big budget failure is what it ended up being. And I went back and I looked, and it's like, I've actually seen 3 or 4 of his movies. And it was just one of those things where I didn't realize that I'd have even watched anything with him. Because in all honesty, he didn't stand out to me in any of those films. because the films were about other people, or at least centered around other people and other characters than him. And even his voice, I thought it was John Hamm when he was first talking, because I had looked down to take some notes, and even then he sounds like other people and looks like other people as well. Where you could easily throw in Thomas Jane from 10, 20 years ago into the same role, or John Hamm into this same role, because there's that certain look, that everyman look that all three of those guys have.
That's actually a really nice
that was how I looked
to the character.
I just mean interchangeable, James.
Just a generic cannibalistic white dude.
Oh man. All right, let's talk about Army really fast, and then we'll use your segue, even though it was really, really good. I know that we're going to get some people that are immediately like, how could you cover this film? He did this, he did that. Because that's like, some of the feedback we get occasionally. I've been yelled at when I went to Guns Akimbo because the director was problematic at the time or whatever else. And like, for me, from the show standpoint, number one, yeah, he's accused of stuff, or he's in rehab, or he's doing whatever. Great. Like a whole bunch of other people worked on this film. And either you are going into it not knowing anything about what's going on with him, or you don't care, or you're not going to watch it. Us covering it doesn't change any of that.
Not to cut you off, but it's also not the same as we're explicitly seeking this film out because we want to support him. We're talking about the film, things that are surrounding the film, and yeah, of course, we can't avoid anything that's there as far as any controversy. Because then we'd be doing a disservice by not at least acknowledging it. I mean, we're not going to go into an in-depth discussion about it, but it's completely different than. Yeah, it's completely different than if specifically chose a film because they're like, yeah, I'm gonna support Armie Hammer, kind of like that country singer who got caught on video saying the N-word, and then all these people went to Twitter to support him and then started buying his albums because he was a racist. It's important to address those things, and even if we talk about other actors, directors, producers, things like that, there's that point where we didn't know what was taking place, or expressly supporting them after they've done something or been accused of something, as opposed to. Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead, James.
Well, I mean, the only thing I was going to add to that is there's a huge difference between talking about accusations, allegations, any of that kind of stuff, and making a judgment call on it. And right. I think that you can be open to hearing somebody's accusations without jumping on the person being accused at the same time. And I'm not saying there's never a time for that, Harvey Weinstein, but like there's a line. And I just wanted to throw out that if anyone has a problem with the fact that we did this episode, you can come talk to me about it, because it is what it is, and we're social commentary and current events, so deal with it.
I have to throw one more thing in there, and I probably shouldn't, but it's just it was just too coincidental. So, when we were going back and forth, because the last episode that we were on together, I picked the film. So I did, Alvaro suggested this one, and it's like, looked into it a little bit more. Like I said, discovered some things that I wasn't aware of. And I've kind of taken like a personal hiatus from the news. Like, it's kind of nice, in the world that we are today, where it's not so dramatic, where it's not shoved in my face. So it's kind of been nice to step away and just not be aware of what's really happening other than outside of my life. But last week I had this, I had to have a little minor medical procedure. And that day I had a lot of stuff going on. I was very busy, a lot of personal stuff happening, work. And then I had to get over to take care of this medical procedure. So I hadn't had anything to eat. I was pretty hungry. Go in there, go to the clinic, get this thing done. It was about a half-hour procedure. I was awake during the whole thing, and then they carterized to the what I had worked on, and I smelled it, and I hadn't had anything to eat, and I immediately was like, this kind of smells like barbecue. I'm kind of hungry, and then I was like, oh my god. this movie and the all this stuff going on, and it just felt like, kind of like it was a sign, like this was the thing that we had to watch. So I'm sick, and I just thought that you should hear that.
Yeah, I think you've gone way past bad cop, Josh.
Right, I know, sicko cop.
I mean, it's our audience. They're into this
franchise. Maniac Cop.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
It's our audience. They just like you more for that, so it's okay. Yeah. So let's go back to your segue, Alvaro. You wanna repeat it and do what you wanted to do before I cut you off so rudely?
Oh yeah, no worries. So let me just add, based on what we've said, and Josh kind of alluding to it. I'm the one who really, Josh said, how about these movies? And he threw out some great options. And I'm like, nah, everybody's seen that. That's too mainstream. Like, come on. So then I suggested this. So the fault lies entirely with me. And I wasn't really aware of the things that were going on in the media. As Josh was saying, I actually quit Instagram and Twitter a while back. And I don't really follow a lot of, celebrity news. And then we just had to kind of make the decision. And I thought, as you guys so eloquently already stated, that it made sense to move forward with the discussion because we want to bring to the attention, interesting work by Nathan Ballingrud, all of the other people that worked on this movie, especially the director, in my opinion, Babak Anvari. We'll say more about him later, I'm sure. And this is not to be taken in any way as an endorsement of any of the behavior of the individual stars or, collaborators on this project. That's not at all what this is about. So I just wanted to be very clear. Also, if anybody has suffered as a result of these circumstances, I think we are all in consensus in empathizing with that and wishing them well and in condemning any acts of wrongdoing or, inappropriate behavior. So just putting that out there.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. And then in terms of the segue, I just thought it was great what Don was saying about not even knowing really the filmography of Armie Hammer and kind of the way he was describing him, because there's something about the character that I think he was specifically cast because it's a little bit against type, but also because he's supposed to be outwardly, charming and affable, but in a kind of non-specific way. Right. And I think that fits perfectly with what you were saying. I did want to ask you guys, though, had no one seen Call Me By Your Name? Because that did get quite a lot of buzz, like at least in the indie or our house kind of circuits.
I have not.
I recall I did not watch it, though, because it wasn't available anywhere where I was. And I think because I know it was nominated for an Oscar. And I believe he was nominated as well. Correct?
I think so. Yeah.
But yeah, I think came out like 2 years ago, and apparently where I am, let's just say it's right next door. There was a movie theater that did not want to show Beauty and the Beast because there was a same-sex kiss. Okay. Yeah. So I will just say that I'm currently in a place where even, you're not going to get any movies that are going to, I guess, offend the certain crowd.
Well, I'll say just as a quick plug then that for anyone interested in indie films or non-studio product, Call Me By Your Name was good. But the reason I ended up watching that it was because I'm a big fan of that particular director, Luca Guadagnino, excuse me. And he, some of his other films include, he did A Bigger Splash. Then he did the remake of Suspiria, and he had directed a film with Tilda Swinton called I Am Love. None of these are horror except the Suspiria, but if you like art house stuff, I definitely recommend him as a director in general.
Okay.
I really kind of enjoyed that Suspiria. It was weird and crazy, but that's interesting. But anyhow, I didn't realize that was the same director.
That was the director of Call Me By Your Name, not the director of Wounds. Just to clarify.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, way off on tangent there already.
Yeah. Well, I got excited for a minute. I was like, maybe this movie was better than I expected, but never mind.
So let's jump into the film. Where do you guys want to start with it?
I'd actually love to hear what your kind of interpretation was, Josh, and then James and Don, what you guys thought of it. I mean, we can kind of go through a lot of the imagery and things like that, but I'm just really curious to see what your responses were to this movie. This is my second time watching it, so it's a little bit different.
Well, yeah, again, knowing that we were going to be, that you and I are here talking about a movie, and I know how you've written reviews for Hex in the past, and we talk about movies all the time. It's like, oh shit, I gotta really like get serious here. I got my notepad out. I was like making notes, and I'm like, I'm gonna have this like really deep perspective. And the movie ends, and I was like, I have no fucking clue what to say about this movie. But so, and I just don't. And honestly, like, I know I'm like throwing a lot of shade at it. I really didn't dislike it or hate it. I didn't love it. There were aspects of it that I thought were really interesting but I do think it's something that I would have to watch again for sure to get kind of a better grasp of what I was looking at. But so I don't really have like a major analysis. But the one thing that like really, I guess, kind of stood out to me that I don't know if it was intentional. Don't know. Again, I was really trying to find something to talk about. But but like horror. This movie, like, there was they're introducing the cell phone as in technology, texting and phone calls is this sort of tool, and how they're presenting horror to us. And I thought it was kind of interesting because the movie kind of starts out like it feels almost like a psychological horror film, and then it has a major tonal shift, I think, about halfway through. But the one thing that like stays consistent, and actually didn't make it very scary to me, was the fact that a lot of the horror was presented through the phone, through photos and technology, and again, that like it was like much like texting is in real life. It's like the interaction is less personal, and I guess for me it was less effective and less scary when they were trying to show the horror through the cell phone. And at first I was like, that was maybe kind of a dumb move on their part to do that, but maybe that was all intentional. Maybe that was sort of the message. So really not much, but that was the thing that kind of stood out to me.
There were a few things I wrote down when I was, and of course we'll come back to this. And especially at the end, it just, I guess it lit something back up that I was thinking about when I was watching this, at least with Will's character. This idea of, I don't even want to use the term arrested development, but this point that some of us have in our lives where we just don't know what the fuck to do. And that's the tone I got from him, where he's got insecurities that you start to see that reveal themselves within his own relationship with Zazie Beetz' character, within his own life as far as what's going on. So I see him as a broken person, but also an incomplete person in a lot of different ways. So when I was watching it didn't strike me, as James and I get into sometimes on here, when somebody comes in and says, this wasn't a real horror movie, this isn't real horror. I didn't see it as the gory stuff, the photos, the teeth and all the blood and stuff like that on it. Because as you say, it kind of takes you away from seeing it as scary. It's scary for the character. It drives fear for them. But as an audience member, you're paying more attention to what he's going through in his life. And having been at that point, my first thought was like, God, I remember when you didn't know what the fuck you were supposed to do with your life. Because the stupid mythology that we've kind of created for people is like, hey, you should know what you want to be by the time you leave home, or you should know what you want to be by the time that you leave college. Right. Oh, well, you should know what you want to be by 30. And then it keeps going. And what I always tell people is, I'm, whatever age I am at that point, and I was like, I still don't know what the hell I want to do with my life. I mean, I do a bunch of different things, but that's not something that's going to drive me to the point where I say I can only do this. So I think you've got a guy who is stunted and hasn't figured out what he wants to do. So the insecurities come from there, right? But then you also have that moment where some people would be insecure because they've driven so far in one direction that they can't, they don't fit in anywhere else.
I guess, just listening to that all makes sense, but I guess it like highlights one of the biggest issues that I had with the film, and that was Will's character is just so. Actually, there's a great line of dialogue in the film when she says that he's just a body. It was something.
Yeah.
He's a mock person.
Yeah. But I mean, in a way, I mean, there was nothing redeemable about Will's character. There was nothing that I could latch onto or connect with. And I don't have a problem where, watching a horror film, where the protagonist or, the main character is spiraling down into this darkness and really for him, I think, he may have been a mock person, but I think he was pure evil in a lot of ways. But and really, I kind of joked, not to go back onto this whole Armie Hammer thing, but it was like maybe he was method acting for this movie and just kind of forgot to pull himself out of that role. But but I mean, like nothing. I just could not connect to him. That was my biggest issue. But anyhow.
Right, let me hit my part, and maybe it will help that. So for me, what I love about this film is that there's so much symbolism and metaphor, and it's just so it becomes exactly like the cockroaches filling everything. So I want to start with the name of the novella, The Visible Filth, because I was thinking about the name of the movie originally, Wounds, and I think that these two actually really tie in together, because what's scary about this movie is not the wound. It's never the wound. Even the armpit wound when he's in the shower, that's not what's scary about this. This isn't about gore or blood. The visible filth that we see is scary because we can see it. But what's inside or not inside is way more fucking terrifying. And so I really love that. But even I want to take it a step further and go full English major. So we have a guy puking outside. So literally a sickness we can't see that we only take into account once we can see it. Fucking amazing. We have a naked woman playing pool. And she's playing pool naked because any woman who takes off her shirt gets a free drink, gets free drinks for the night or whichever way it is, right? Number one, what I like about this is she is not mainstream hot.
Right.
I love that. What is Armie Hammer's character's name? I can't remember off the top of my head. Sorry. Will. So Will, what? Sorry. You still there?
Yo, you ever still at 31, by the way.
Okay. Sorry, my computer did something weird and I thought I lost everything. 31? All right. So Will, he enforces this policy for anybody. It's fine. It's not just a hot chick rule, right? Which is what I would expect looking at his character. So I love that. But also, being naked in public, you're supposed to cover up. You're supposed to keep your visible filth hidden away from society. We don't want to know your secrets. I love that that's in there. We get to, this whole cockroach metaphor, and we'll probably talk about this more in a minute, so I'm just going to summarize this really fast. But I love that the people are also cockroaches. When the cops get called, they scatter like cockroaches when the lights come on. Everything in this is about coming together and immediately running from each other. And to answer what Josh said, you said he's pure evil. And I think that goes to having nothing inside of you. If you have nothing inside of you, you have no empathy, you have no sympathy, you have no reason to help others. It's solely about this moment and what I want. And Will's entire arc is finding something to fill the emptiness inside. And he does at the end. He finds a purpose.
Yeah.
All right. There you go.
Well, I want to say... Oh.
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. I was just going to jump in with a couple of things that James brought up. I guess this is kind of a really cool cultural reflection on screen. Because as I was watching this, within 2 seconds, I knew it was New Orleans, just because of, some of the decorative items, some of the beers, all that stuff that was there. And when they showed that young lady who was naked in the bar to reconfirm, Will's conversation with Alicia, he was like, "Oh, if you take the shirt off, it's free drinks for the night." And the woman who's playing pool, she's over there. It's kind of like, "Yeah, that's right," and she's just full on naked in the bar. And that's two different things. One, there's not a real, I guess, body shaming that takes place throughout New Orleans as far as like residents of that area. And I'm not talking about Mardi Gras. I'm talking about normal stuff. Like you can walk down whether it's Canal, Bourbon, Royale, Dauphin, you can walk down any of those streets near the French Quarter, and there may be someone of any size twerking in the middle of the street or responding to bounce music. And I will say this from personal experience. I've seen people of all sizes, gender identities that have done that. And it's just one of those things where people don't judge because that's the city. Right. So I thought that was a great thing to include because my perspective was different on it, possibly from James because of the exposure to it. But even the idea of New Orleans itself is seen as a dirty city. I mean, just to build on the idea of the visible dirt and things like that. It's seen as a dirty city by people on the outside. People on the inside just see it as any normal city, any normal community. But when you pull back a little bit, you do see more of that stuff like somebody puking in the street or somebody peeing in the street or in some cases, somebody shitting in the street. And you see all those things there. And once you get accustomed to it, you don't see that as different, absurd, or just something that might be disturbing to you. So, I mean, also from watching this, I just see the level of comfort that everybody there has with someone who just decides, well, shit, free drinks? Well, fuck it, I'll do it too. But please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, following from comments that you both just made, I mean, one of the things that I really enjoyed about this, both the novella and this film kind of reimagining of it, is that it's very difficult to place when you think about, for example, terms of like genre tropes or genre elements. So I was just thinking about this yesterday. I mean, as you guys were saying, there's a couple of shots of, violence or what I would call really even body horror, right? There's also an aspect of cosmic horror. There's a part of this, all of the things that have to do with the internet and the cell phone usage and kind of addiction to cell phones. There's this sort of technophobic aspect to it as well.
Right.
There's the whole sense, like was mentioned by I think everybody so far. Will and his emptiness, his just drifting through life. It frames it up in this very existential way. So there's this current of existential dread. And one of the aesthetic things that I really love, by the way, is that there's no score. It's all sound design. And I think that makes sense because there's no melody, and there's no musical themes that accompany anything that's happening because this is really Will's journey. And since he's empty, there's no music there. And so you have all of those things. And then the setting is really kind of, as you were just, for all of the reasons you just said, Don, it's this very creative setting that you would normally think of as being colorful and sort of full of life. And yet you have this one person who's just a void in the middle of that. And then on top of that, you have a lot of elements that are more like thriller and even hard boiled. There's a couple of parts of this that made me think of You Were Never Really Here, the Lynn Ramsey film adapted from the Jonathan Ames novella. And then one other thing to throw in there, there's also, this is kind of in conversation with I think works by writers like Charles Bukowski and other, kind of really gritty urban writers that feature a lot of alcohol and kind of urban decay in terms of kind of mainstream lit. So all of these things are just, in my opinion, beautifully blended in to this one novella where every scene is working on, I think, on multiple levels at the same time. And then just in terms of Will's character, there were two parts that I just highlighted from the novella that I think really do a beautiful job of capturing some of what we're talking about. There's one passage where it says, Will had spent his life skimming over the surface of things, impatient with the requirements of engagement. He told himself that this was because he was open to experience in a way most people weren't, that you sapped the potential for spontaneity from life if you regimented your hours with obligation. And then the next sentence starts with, this rationalization came upon him in college, which I think is fantastic because even he knows that this is not, it doesn't really hold up to like careful scrutiny. And then later on the same page, it says, if there was something hollow underneath it all, a well of fear that sometimes seemed to pull everything else into it and leave him clutching the stone rim to keep from falling into himself, well, that was just a part of being human, he supposed. That's what the booze was for.
Wow.
Now everybody should go out and buy the book, right? But
of course.
Yeah, and I think and one other thing that was mentioned also just in terms of the roaches, because we already brought this up. So watching this film the second time, I noticed that when you see the studio logo, the Annapurna studio logo, it already starts to flicker. There's some kind of destabilizing effect that's going on that I think foreshadows seeing things through a cell phone. And you have the sound. You probably got this because of your headphone experience, James. But you have the sound of scurrying, like you hear like scuttling roaches before you even see anything on the screen. This is, in my opinion, really a wonderful aesthetic choice because the book opens with a description of roaches. That's the very first line, and I want to share with you guys. It says the roaches were in high spirits. There were half a dozen of them, caught in the teeth of love. And then that paragraph ends with the roaches, they swung their antennae with a ripe sexual urgency, tracing love sonnets in the air. So what I find fascinating about this is you hear roaches at the beginning of the movie. The opening paragraph of this novella talks about roaches, but there's not any negative connotation to it whatsoever. They're in high spirits. They're caught in the teeth of love. They're writing sonnets in the air. All of these things are really sort of beautiful, positive, almost ecstatic expressions of life. And I think that really fits in well with what you were saying, that the visible filth is actually not the thing that's disturbing or terrifying in any way. The visible filth is great because it's something that's visible. At the end of the novella and at the end of the film, we obviously get the scene with an outpouring of roaches. And as the book makes really explicit, the roaches are actually terrified. They're running away from what's happening. It says that the startled cockroaches scrambled from their lairs, and it describes them as Christ-bound spirits. And so what I think is amazing about all of this is that the roaches at the end are fleeing from whatever is happening, being birthed through Eric and going to Will. And I think that tells us that the evil that this film is exploring is so vile that by comparison, cockroaches, which we normally think of as horrible and, disgusting, become the authors of love sonnets and they possess religious spirituality. I mean, that's insane, right? That's just...
Well, and they're experiencing something much deeper than Will is. That automatically sets it up as he's so empty, he's past that.
Yeah, great point.
That's pretty great.
I really want to see like a fan-made trailer that like just repurposes this as like a dark reboot of Joe's Apartment.
Damn it.
Yes.
Will's pad.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Eric's face. Oh.
And again, to go like from smart cop to dumb cop, I'm gonna since you were so enlightened by all of that, the one thing that really stood out to me, and it's just because, again, as a writer, this stuff sort of pops a little bit, but the dialogue, I mean, I think the writers were channeling Jesse Pinkman. If you watch it again, I'm going to count the amount of times that various characters just throw down the word bitch. It's like, he's a bitch. He's a fucking bitch. Hey, bitches, bitch. I was like, oh my God. And again, when this fan-made trailer comes out, that I hope someone does after they listen to this podcast, that will kind of tie it into that kind of Joe's Apartment reboot, you know, 'cause similar dialogue, I think.
I love that. You know, I that kind of stuff always pops out to me too, like where you can tell like a writer uses a certain phrase because like 3 people use it when it doesn't happen in daily life. So I'm glad that other people pay attention to stuff like that.
I also downloaded the script, Josh, and the word the word bitch appears 5 times and pussies appears twice. So just you have those stats now. You don't have
really. That's it.
It feels like way more than that. Were they just adding to it at that point?
I think I'm just empty, so it echoed inside. You know, I'm similar to Will. It was just like I heard it.
We'll get you some cockroaches. It'll be fine.
But but I have to. I don't know how much more time we have. But
we have as long as you want. Don't worry about it.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, I really, truly want to hear Alvaro's take on the ending, because I mean the movie, the last because actually something happened with my dogs. I had to pause it, and the timeline showed that there was like 17 minutes left, and I came back to it. And that last 17 or so minutes, that's when I was like really starting to get engaged. Everything was had me intrigued, and yeah, I was one of those. I was disappointed in how it concluded, because that was when I was ready to go. I was ready to get something more out of it, and it just abruptly ended. Which is a trend, in my opinion, that I think more like art house indie filmmakers employ. Some of them effectively, some of them it feels like a cop-out. But I perceived it as a cop-out. And I kind of briefly chatted with Alvaro last night, and you did not. So I want to hear your take on that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, not at all.
I do it in my free time. No. All right, give it to us.
I mean, I think you already hit on the main, just from a thematic perspective, James. I mean, I definitely think this is a story about a character who is empty, and what this does in an almost really, I think, kind of groundbreaking way is that it's a story of empowerment by willful, like, evil possession. I think that from a plot perspective, the movie is suggesting that the kids who got a hold of the books were able to contact this entity. And we get a couple of glimpses of the entity. You kind of have to freeze those frames. When I'm talking about the entity, I mean specifically the thing that we see as a sort of this baggy flesh with an eye, and where the pupil should be, inside the eye, there's actually this jagged shape of just void. So whatever that creature is, and you know, they talk about Gnosticism, and we can kind of go down that whole path to try to interpret what that is. But this higher being is being birthed in this story. It's being, you know, communicated to physical form, and a lot of things have been set up in motion by these kids, but essentially Eric is the one who is giving birth to it. And the final scene, in my opinion, if you watch very, very carefully, the creature actually emerges from the wound in Eric's face, and Will is opening his mouth extremely wide, and the creature is entering Will's mouth, and you can actually see that baggy, sort of pustulant kind of eye in the face as he's eating it or absorbing it into his mouth. And so, as you were saying, James, I think this is just the story of this character who was completely empty, and in his desperate need to have any kind of meaning or affirmation, he decides that he's going to welcome this in, because he still has a choice, right? He's been cursed, if you want to call it that, or he's been set up as the recipient of this creature. But there are several points in the story where he still chooses to go down a path, and no one is forcing him to do those things. And he's kind of like the perfect vessel or the perfect vehicle for this entity to be given physical form. So I think that it ends there because of 2 reasons. That's the completion of his arc. And then also, we can't really see what goes beyond because if we did in some way, we would become complicit with the evil. And I want to talk about that a little bit later.
Wow.
I don't know. I think I want to hear that now.
Later is now.
The only thing I want to add to that before you do that is when you were talking about the entity moving over into him and how you can see it, my initial reaction in the moment, I was mad at how it pulls out and I don't get to see it as well.
Right.
But like the more I've sat here and thought about it, the more I kind of like how it pulls away from anything a human understands at this point. Like all of my understanding, I can't be a part of this anymore. Like my brain can't handle it. Like it goes to that Lovecraft level of cosmic horror that would make you insane if you understood it.
Right.
But yeah, in that moment, I was like, "Fuck you," and the longer I've sat here with it, the more that's the scene I concentrate on, and the more I fight making jokes about Armie Hammer eating flesh, and the more I keep thinking that it's the right choice to pull away from it. I don't know.
Okay, I want to jump in there actually before we dive into that, but this to me is very interesting. I was reading about some details about the Gnostic belief system, and I'm curious what you make of this. It is a widely held belief in Gnostic circles that Jesus Christ was an ordinary man who attained divinity when a superior being, a spiritual being, and this part is important, possessed his body. What the ritual apparently intended was to make contact with one of these superior beings through a kind of ceremony that involved slaughtering a human, and force a portal, a tunnel, to connect this reality with the being in question, a tunnel that linked to someone's wound. That's pretty. I love this movie now.
When they're doing the research, there's actually a little reference to the gateway to Pleroma. I don't know if you guys saw that. It's just this quick little fragment of text on one of the Google pages that they're researching. But I mean, if you look, I mean, just based on what I found, that refers to within Gnosticism specifically, that pleroma refers to filling up an empty thing or completing an incomplete thing, which definitely lines up with what you were saying, James, and kind of the interpretation that I got from this. And the pleroma is this sort of seen as a hierarchical family of personified eons, and the eons are these emanations of the divine. And typically in this belief system, through my extremely superficial understanding, the eons emerge as the fruit of a spiritual self-contemplation. So there's something very ironic about it too, because obviously Will hasn't really done any contemplation, right? He's the least introspective character. He always resists introspection when he's given the chance for it. But through this, in this setup, he is now going to be potentially the recipient of this eon, of this emanation of this otherworldly force. So I thought that was cool that they alluded to something that was that specific, as opposed to just, generic, Satanism or things that you often see in movies like this. And then the other thing that I was talking about, just to make that point real briefly, was the element of technology, right? There's something in the way that the role of cell phones in the story, there's something insidious about them. There's the way that the characters respond to the cell phones. And this I'm probably being influenced by a line in the novella, but there's a line in the novella where it talks about how he flicks the cell phone away as though it's a roach. So there's this almost suggestion of technology's insectile and really creepy and invasive. And I think that there's a couple of moments where she has the choice not to see what's on the phone, but she chooses to do it. Will knows after his initial experiences that he really should not have anything more to do with this phone, but he continues to use it. When the fight breaks out in the bar, the first thing that the kids do is record what's happening. When he has his car accident, the first thing that people do is take out their cell phones and record what's happening. So there's all of these instances of people using cell phones not to connect with others, but to sort of document and capture really uncomfortable or unpleasant things. And to me, when I watched that last sequence, not only does it pull away, but what happens is that there are so many roaches that if you actually look very carefully, roaches start to occlude the screen. So there's a couple of roaches that are like, obviously fictionally, they're smashed against the lens of the camera. And those are the roaches that are filling up part of the frame where we would normally be able to see exactly what's happening. And I think that is sort of the filmic or the visual aspect of what is in the book, where it says that the roaches scramble away like Christ-bound spirits. The roaches are actually protecting us by not letting us see everything that's there, because just like the characters in the movie that know that they shouldn't be looking at these things on the cell phone, we know that we really shouldn't be witnessing what is about to happen. But we can't help ourselves. We really want to. We want to see it. And rather than being, kind of fully consumed by witnessing the horror outright, we only get to glimpse a little bit of it because the roaches are actually sacrificing themselves to protect us.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I think it's really obvious, and even more so than when he's looking at the photographs and everything on the phone. He gets a call, and there's that he's listening too, and he's trying to pull the phone away, but he can't.
Right.
It takes a lot of effort. I mean, to me, immediately I just thought, me personally, it's like I you think about Facebook and Twitter and everything, where it's just this addictive, we're just glued to it. And for me, it's like I have to kind of force myself. I know it's bad for me. I have to I initially have to delete the app from my phone and take a break. And I thought that was great. That it's like, really, really throwing it in our face that all of this, we're having to fight to pull ourselves away from all of this nastiness in our lives. I thought that was pretty apparent and constantly in your face. I mean, I thought that they were really throwing that out there for us. But that's really neat to think of it. I didn't process it like that with the cockroaches as being there to kind of protect us from it. That's really cool.
See, I actually took the opposite point of view. I took it as like, get out of here. This isn't for you. So not necessarily protecting, just like, what the hell are you doing here?
Right.
Like a bouncer at the bar.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything malicious with it or anything. I don't know. To me, it was more of a, this is our world, you don't belong here kind of thing.
Well, no, I just, he's again, going back to that, like he's addicted to the phone. And then when he's driving the truck and it like becomes fleshy and the roaches appear and he throws the phone out the window and, freaks out, jumps, pulls off to the side of the road, runs around, rips his shirt off, and then everybody else, it's like he threw that out, get it away. And then when he looks back at the whole crowd, I'm kind of repeating what's already been said, but they're all on their phones and now they're looking at him. It's just, it was really, really neat how they were throwing both perspectives at it.
Yeah. And I would say, in terms of social commentary, which is, kind of the theme of the podcast, I mean, we're getting into this, so I'm just going to bring it up. I think that one of the themes of the film is substance abuse, and the technological aspect is just one instance of it. I think that if you look carefully at the behaviors of almost all of the male characters specifically, there is a lot of abuse, right? So Eric, the guy who is involved in the fight and who has the wound, it seems like he's addicted to conflict. I mean, he's always kind of aggressive and looking to stir up trouble. Obviously, Will has problems with alcohol consumption, but he's also addicted, I would say, to avoidance. He plays video games to get out of the situation during the day. He goes after Alicia to evade the problems in his own relationship. He quit college because he didn't want to deal with that. Eventually, he ends up even quitting his job at Rosie's. Whenever there's an issue, he avoids dealing with it. And then we've talked about the addiction to technology. None of the cell phone usage is portrayed in a positive way. But I think that the female characters are actually treated, again, in a slightly, in a different and kind of consistent way, where Alicia is not a perfect character in the sense of her behavior always being maybe ideal, but she resists temptation. I mean, she makes a mistake and she decides this is not what I want. She tells Will that she wants to get her life back on track and that she feels like she's wasting it. That's one of the things she says when they're driving at one point. Carrie, too, his girlfriend. I mean, she's partially invaded by this horror, by the fascination of this abomination, but she still hangs in there. And she explicitly says, no matter what's going on, I would never abandon the person that I'm with. She's also trying to improve herself through schooling. And then again, even Rosie, a secondary character, she's pretty strong too. She's trying to help Will. She's willing to kind of overlook, his shoddy behavior. She's willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. So I thought that was an interesting difference in the way that the characters were constructed as well.
Yeah, I feel like the women in this movie have a much better grasp on what they want out of life.
Yes.
But going to the addiction thing we were just talking about, they're also much better at setting boundaries.
Yes.
They're better at holding to those boundaries. And yet what I like about it is it shows how you can set boundaries and other people will just keep trying to walk over them.
Right.
Like Alicia has to keep telling him, don't call me. I'm with this guy. I'm doing this. Like, you need to step away, And Carrie, I believe her name is, like, when he breaks up with her, she sets boundaries right away. You need to go find a place to stay until you get an apartment. Like, what'd you think we were going to do? Fucking cuddle?
It's brutal.
But it's so good too. Like, it's such a powerful thing. And I don't know that this matters, but I would argue she is not cheating on him with this guy. I think that's solely justification for what he feels about Alicia. I think he's projecting that entire thing. So I look at his girlfriend and she's like, how do you know how to break into someone's phone? And he explains how he did it. And she's like, what am I going to find on this phone? Like she's always preparing herself and trying to understand what she needs in the moment. Like, she doesn't want to see him cheating on the phone, but she also needs to know. But she's not prepared for what she actually finds on the phone.
Right.
And he could just be a man and be like, there's fucking decapitated heads on this phone. You don't want to see this. Then at least she'd have a warning, And instead he just basically cares about himself and doesn't do anything for her in this moment. But even the lady I brought up earlier playing pool, this lady has her own fucking boundaries, man. And as soon as, like, she's completely naked, and when somebody makes an inappropriate sexual comment to her, she puts on all her shit and walks out, and no one can stop her. She set her boundaries, she enforced them, and she doesn't care who's trying to violate them. So I would argue, every woman in this is so much better at boundaries and knowing what they need.
But what do you think? This kind of the girlfriend, the performances were all very, very good. But and I can't remember her name, the character's name, the girlfriend's name. But
Dakota Johnson.
What was it? Sorry.
Oh, the actress is Dakota Johnson. She plays Carrie.
Carrie. Okay. Yeah. So Carrie, everything that's going on, her reaction to everything is very kind of monotone. And when things are okay, she sounds the same way. When she's upset, she sounds the same. But then you've got Will, who's this empty shell of a person who's incredibly emotional. And he's like this roller coaster of reactions, right? Mm-hmm. And I kind of wonder if they were trying to portray the girlfriend, through Will's POV. We're seeing this character who's throwing everything at him, and she's kind of emotionally void to him. That sort of stood out to me. Like, she just she was deep, but on a surface level, she was very simplistic, and she was total opposite of Will. Yet again, Will is not deep, and he's just this like she even said, this mock person, this empty shell of a human.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting, and it also, in my opinion, there's some commentary on sort of toxic masculinity or masculinity in different guises, right? There's the point where Will says of Eric, "Oh, he thinks he's Rambo," so that's like pretty explicit. And then later, though, that comes up, that kind of echoes in the. I mean, Will is in his mind sort of trying to justify that he's breaking up with Carrie because he wants to protect her. And she's like, "Are you serious? Are you an action hero now? You know, like really? This is what you're going with? Like it just strains belief." And then also at the beginning, I remember of the movie, he says, "Oh, don't worry your pretty little face about it. You let your man handle things," which again is sort of he's doing it playfully. I don't think he's necessarily completely serious about playing that role, but it's still there. It's still something that he's saying. And while he's mocking it, I think that he's also being mocked by everything that happens after that. In terms of the emotions, I think that Carrie does show, a healthy level of response to different situations. But like you were saying, Josh, Will is already becoming so affected and kind of unstable. And I really like the thing that you said, James, that there's a lot of projection from him, right? Because the moment that struck me the most in terms of projection was when he comes to find her late at night, and she's been, obviously like obsessively consumed by the picture of the tunnel on the laptop. And she says, "I feel foggy." And then the first thing that he does, he immediately asks her with suspicion, "Are you drunk?" I mean, this is Will. Really? Really? He gets to ask that question?
How dare you get your alcohol from somebody and it wasn't me?
Yeah. I feel like he's really projecting his fear of being judged as drinking too much. Mm-hmm. That comes up again in the little side comment about like, "Oh yeah, it'll be great to spend time with your uncle so that he can judge me while he doesn't drink." So he has all of these sort of fears of being judged that turn into projections of other people.
I just kept thinking...
Go ahead.
Well, no, pointless. I was like, wow, I wish I could drink that much and have that great physique.
But no, what I was going to say is he doesn't care about her. Like if somebody told me they felt foggy, my first question would be, "Are you okay? Like, how do you feel now?"
Right.
And he's, "Are you drunk? Was someone else here?"
Yeah.
Like it's so... Yeah. So I think even if he was playful at the beginning with the "let your man handle it," like he's living it.
Yeah.
So maybe he doesn't know he's doing it, but he's definitely doing it. What'd you guys think of that bathtub scene? Because there's two things I like about this. So my first is like the idea that he thought that that's what would help, right? Like he's been so trashed and so drunk that he knows the only thing that can help you is a bathtub. Like that's a different level. That's not just sleeping it off. You know what I'm saying? Like the fact that that's his answer, that told me he's done this a lot. But my second thing with it was we don't get nudity here. Like it's very respectful to her.
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting from a shooting point of view. But what'd you guys think of it overall?
I mean, I think it's a very effective sequence. It's very unnerving because, in my opinion, it really forces you to kind of confront Will's ambivalence. You think superficially he's trying to help her. He came home like from a unexamined point of view. He is the protective man who wants to make sure that there's not an intruder in the house to, take care of his partner. But then his actions really call that into question. And when she slips into the water and he sees the water turn dark, he just basically backs away. He does nothing. Right. He doesn't try to pull her back up or figure out why the water's become tainted. He just sort of stands there, not sure what's going to happen. He's extremely passive. And, seconds go by and she's not coming up for air. So, I mean, to me, that sort of suggests, again, his extreme passivity and his inability to deal with a very simple situation just from a practical perspective.
Yeah, that's true. He doesn't even like if you saw somebody go under for that amount of time, you'd pull them out. Like,
right? Isn't that
it'd be different if he was in shock.
Right.
But he doesn't seem like he's in shock. He's just fucking sitting there. You're right.
That was my whole thought process was, I mean, I was like counting like the seconds. It's like, oh my God, do something. But then I was like, maybe he's like me, where he's a little OCD. And it's like, ooh, the water's dirty. But he's not really, because she like wet her pants and he put her on the bed before putting her in the bath. So I guess that's not an excuse. Yeah, he's just fucked up.
I
like that. I think that sums it up. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, since you mentioned that scene, I will tell you my favorite single beat of this movie. It's actually when he has the cell phone. He comes back home after the fight at the bar, and he unlocks it. It's that little, really self-satisfied, conky grin that he has on his face when he figures out how to use, the little smudges on the screen to break the access code, right? And he kind of just like shimmies his head back and forth just for a split second with a smile, like, well, look at me, I got this. And I just think it's just fascinating because he's living this completely unexamined life. He's kind of diseased with apathy, as we've been talking about, but he's totally captive to the illusion that he is gaining control precisely as he's about to lose it. Like when he unlocks that phone, there's really no going back. And that's the moment that he's most confident, based on his, mannerism, his externalized behavior, that everything is just absolutely wonderful. Like he's got this.
I wondered, and I'm probably overthinking it. Obviously, there
That's
was
all we do.
Yeah, there was some symbolism there with his T-shirt. I can't remember that like 80s. I can't. I'd have to look it up. But there's a T-shirt that he wears throughout the majority of the film. But I was wondering when he was unlocking
Morgus the Magnificent is the T-shirt.
Right. But I was wondering if there was some symbolism too, and again, overthinking it, there probably wasn't, but it would be cool if because I thought that they emphasized the shape, that triangle shape, when he unlocked the phone, and I was kind of wondering if that was somehow tied to this occult, this belief system, or I don't know if any of you thought anything about that because the camera makes they made a point to focus on that, so. Wasn't
it's
sure.
Also, the fact that he traces it twice.
Yes,
that really adds to it. Do you have something on this, Alvaro?
Unfortunately, I kind of obsessed about this, so I'm going to go on a little rant.
Excellent, do it.
So, thank you, Josh. This was not, for anyone who's listening, this was not prearranged. So yeah, the way to unlock it is it's an upside down triangle, right? So the first thing that I thought about, just because of I happen to have a background in physics, so I was like, oh, that's the delta, that's what we call the del or the nabla symbol, and it's the symbol that you use in differential calculus, and it's basically something that symbolizes the derivative of a function or a different kind of calculus operator. So that's just a way to symbolize change. So I thought, okay, it could be that, but that seems a little bit, why would they have a science-specific reference? That didn't really make sense to me. So I looked up in terms of alchemy, the upside down triangle, is a symbol of water, which is easy to remember because it kind of looks like a glass or a cup. And that is interesting because the idea of drinking is definitely connected with Will and with his loss of control. Also, if you go to Alcoholics Anonymous, it could be a reference to that because they use a triangle which is actually pointing up, and that's supposed to represent unity, service, and recovery. And here it's inverted, so it's everything that he's losing or that he doesn't have. Two superimposed downward triangles, from what I could see, are typically seen as a symbol of femininity, earth, nature, and the cosmic world. From a really sort of funny perspective, I guess, to me, we're all familiar with that as the symbol for yield and traffic, which is what he really should be doing, but he isn't.
That's pretty great.
And then the last two that I found, I found this book online called Gnostic Rosicrucian Kabbalah. I'm just going to say that again. Gnostic Rosicrucian Kabbalah. And there's a table of symbols, and the upside down triangle says it symbolizes catastrophe. And I think that's probably the closest to what they could be going for in the movie, right? Because again, that's the moment where everything turns, everything hinges on that.
Very cool.
I'm just going to quit the show again, Don. I'm quitting the show. I can't compete with that. I'm out of here. No, wow. Just wow. Seriously. I love all of that. I don't know how much was purposeful, obviously, but I hope that the writer is just like, yeah, everything he said. That's what it was. That was amazing.
Well, but the big question, though, I mean, the whole reason everybody has listened to this far is how does this tie into Star Trek?
I knew somebody would ask. I was going to do it at the end if you didn't.
Oh my gosh, you guys are too much.
I know you figured it out. I know that was like the top thing on your list.
Can you explain what we're talking about before you tackle this?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So I think it was when we did the podcast on Pumpkinhead, I was bringing up all of these different connections to Star Trek. And then you and I were going back and forth on DM while I was still on Twitter. This is clearly the reason I had to leave that platform, James. I couldn't handle it.
I was taking up your whole day, yes.
Yeah, you're like, well, not every movie is related to Star Trek. How about this? How about that? I'm like, here you go. This, the sound technician and this person did cinematography and blah, blah, blah. We fell into this weird sort of rabbit hole where it seemed like apparently any movie that we could come up with had somebody that had worked on it, that had worked on part of the Star Trek franchise or some reference to Star Trek. And the one thing that I'll say in connection again to this fantastic director, Babak Anvari, is that he was interviewed by Collider and they said Star Wars or Star Trek, and he said Star Trek, of course. So I think
that's it. That's what I've been waiting for.
I'm sorry to be like the ending of Wounds.
Right. that was good.
That's still pretty great. I was making a joke with him before we did this that like the connection will be, well, Armie Hammer watched Star Trek once, so.
Since we're talking about people that worked on the movie, I actually wanted to call out a couple of names because, again, I think a lot of times in these discussions, it's sort of nice to give kudos where I think that they're due. The editing is by someone named Chris Barwell, and I think that the editing is really powerful in this movie. It creates this sort of metronome of dread, this really cool rhythm of mounting anxiety. Also, I think the cinematography was great. Kit Frazier. Shout out to Kit Frazier for cinematography. And then there were a lot of people that were listed in the sound design department, but Simon Hott was listed as sound effects editor. And I really think, kind of kidding aside, it's an extremely immersive and really compelling use of sound in a lot of clever ways. So I wanted to call those out. And then I wanted to follow up with a comment. Don, you were saying that this made you think of other movies. I jotted down a couple of other movies that I think that this is in conversation with, but I'd love to hear what your take was, and anyone else who wants to go in that direction as well.
Yeah, cool. Before we get to that, do you guys have anything else you want to talk about with the movie? Because we normally do that at the very, very end. So, do you guys have any other major themes?
Well, I just want to throw it out there that I'm actually excited to watch it again just after having this conversation because this kind of opened me up to it a little bit more. So I'm going to dive back in pretty soon, I think.
Well, I would just to go where Alvaro was going. There's that one line near the end, and this is why I'm not disappointed in the ending. I'm not 100% satisfied, but I'm not disappointed with the ending. Because I found myself writing down people's lines or quotes from the movie more than I was writing notes. Because what people were saying or what people were responding to was standing out to me a lot more. And this one part where, it says, fix me, make me whole, really goes back to when we were earlier talking about this idea of him being an incomplete person or a mock person, things like that. And for me, it struck me as this guy didn't know what he was looking for, got the insecurities based off of that possibly, doesn't know what he's looking for. But he understands at one point something's wrong with him. As far as like goals haven't been attained, the dropping out of college, there are all these things that he didn't achieve, but maybe that wasn't the thing that he needed. It was, to go along the lines of predestination. Like he's now finding his purpose in life, and it's to be the vessel for something else. So he never had control over anything. And it is great how what he does do is he alienates himself from so many people to where it's so much easier for him to become a vessel. Yeah. Because if he had stayed with Carrie, or Alicia was receptive to him, and he ended up having a family, I mean, he doesn't have that emptiness, or at least as much emptiness as he would need in order to become a vessel, or to be serving as a perfect vessel. Because he might have kids, and it seems like, oh shit, I screwed up all these other things. I'm going to focus on being a good father, and that becomes the thing that fills that hole in his life or in his body. And it pushed me into thinking about when it comes to people trying to figure out what they want to do with their lives. I mean, you really don't know until it happens.
I think that's a great interpretation and kind of enhancement of everything that we were talking about. I mean, there is a line, like you said, I think that those final lines that he speaks are extremely powerful. Fix me, make me whole. In the novella, there's an earlier section. There's a couple of references to him. Just at one point, it says that it describes that there was just a need and he had to answer it, but he didn't know what it was, which definitely goes along with he's just being pulled on this current, and he's kind of resisting all of the normal entanglements of life. Maybe because in some way this is his fate. And there was another little passage where it said what he felt was a terrible yearning. He didn't even know what for. But what he felt it like a physical ache, like something on fire. And I just thought, again, that really goes along with what you're you are describing, and combined with his inability to deal with his emotions. There's also a passage where it says that something big was trapped inside of him, some great sadness, but he couldn't find a way to address it. He wondered if it would become the thing that defined him. He imagined himself in the third person as someone observed and understood by an invisible witness.
My response to both of you is I think that you're too nice, and I'm a very jaded individual. Mine is fix me, make me whole, because I don't want to do any work and do shit myself. Somebody else do it for me. That's my only real takeaway. Outside of that, I agree with everything you said. But I do think that that's also part of it. Like, I don't think either one is right. I think they're two sides of the same coin.
Right.
I do think I agree with everything you guys just said. But I also feel like he's so insistent on not putting in the work himself.
Right.
Right.
Also, there's a little irony when I only noticed this the second time. But right at the beginning, when they're just kidding around at the bar, and they're like, "Oh wow, how can you do that?" or whatever, and he says, "I'm just blessed."
I got one more thing that I feel like I have to mention, and this goes to, I guess, the story and the production. Was the book based in New Orleans as well?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm asking that because I appreciate, at least from the storytelling standpoint, that you've got New Orleans itself featured, and it's not about vampires or voodoo. And typically, when New Orleans is featured in a horror story, or just in horror in general, those are the two things that just dominate when we're talking about it. So, I mean, there's never this point of, oh, we put a voodoo spell on you, and we've turned you into a walking voodoo doll, or we possessed your soul through a spell that we cast at some voodoo shop. You have dark magic being involved, or at least that, but it's not, hey, we've got the Hollywood version of this, or we just have, you got bitten by a vampire. Now this is going to be your purpose. You're going to walk the night. You get to keep your job.
At least they stuck with the whole bar vibe and getting drunk in New Orleans. You couldn't ignore that.
Oh no, there's no way you can get away from it.
The only other thing that I have on the film before we talk about maybe other movies or influences is I wanted to ask you guys, why do you think that Eric refuses Will, when he's trying to insist, like, I really need to stay at your apartment, I need to crash with you, he's like, no, you need to leave, you need to get out of here. He tries like 3 or 4 times. What do you guys think that that's about?
I mean, I thought he was just trying to save him. I think, yeah. Like there's that part of him that still wants to save his friend. Like the only guy that ever fucking stuck up for him.
So you think he was trying to save Will from himself?
I think he was trying to save him from the entity. I think he was like they forced me to trap you here. They forced me to get you here.
Right.
You're here. And I'm like, get the fuck out, man. Run while you can.
I see. I got you.
Like,
I thought of it total opposite, but
okay.
Interesting. No, but I interrupted you, so go ahead and finish. Sorry.
No, it actually might play into what you were going to say. I was going to say the only other thing I can think of is that he knows Will does the opposite of what anyone tells him to do.
Yeah.
I took it as kind of a survival mode, selfish. I mean, he's like, get out of here to save himself because, he's a present wrapped in flesh. Isn't that his end essentially? If by allowing Will to have the entity fill his void. I mean, that's exactly how I took it. Is that this is just was the guy trying to sleep this off? Is that what he thought he could do? So I mean, that's essentially what he was doing for the majority of the film. After he got that nice shot to the face, but I looked at it too. As he was trying to save himself.
Yeah, I like that because it would be, I don't want to give this up. Like if you're here, it's going to move to you and I'll be alone and empty again.
Right.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I think I took it more in the sense that Josh was describing. I also think that as we've talked about, I mean, Will kind of burns all of the bridges and destroys all of his relationships, right? Carrie, Rosie, Alicia, whomever he's had a positive interaction with, that's been severed by the time we get to that sequence. Eric's basically the last of his quote unquote acquaintances or friends. We don't know exactly how far that bond goes, but I feel like Eric in some way may be perceiving that this guy is really just some kind of psychic vampire who is about to trigger this cataclysmic event that's going to not be good for Eric. So he's out of, like you were saying, Josh, out of the desire to protect himself, he's like, no, you need to get out of here. Because he knows that if he stays, something bad is going to happen. And whether it's just losing the entity or whether it's actually being destroyed in the process of giving birth to it and having it ripped through him and go into Will, neither of those outcomes are desirable. So,
right. Yeah.
Well, I guess even on a purely human level, like this guy abandoned you. You're going through this horrible thing, and he barely bothered himself to sit with you for a bit because you were scared of your nightmares. Yeah. And he hasn't really checked on you. Nope. He hasn't called to see how you are or swung by or brought you something for your face from the pharmacy. Nothing. So yeah, I mean, even just a human, you take all the rest of this out of it, say he was just sick. I wouldn't want to put up with this dude that abandoned me at this point. So yeah.
I guess again, I think of him as a piece of shit with a Confederate flag on his wall, starting shit in my bar.
Yep.
So I'd be like, fuck you. Let that thing get an infection.
I actually put that in my notes. I was like, I don't care about Eric now.
Right.
Plays a good asshole. I mean, there are a couple of roles where I've seen him in where he was like I guess a nice guy or just a normal person. I was like, I want to hate you though. You're so good at being an asshole.
All right, you want to jump into movies, Don?
Yeah, let's do it. So,
all right.
For anybody who's seen this film or watched this film or is looking for something similar to it or in some way related to it, what do either one of you have as recommendations?
Well, because I know that mine response is far less thoughtful, I might as well get that out of the way first. Because I'm sure Alvaro's got this massive list of interesting things I can't wait to hear about, which is when I'll mute him. But no, I don't really have. I guess for me, the first thing that comes to mind, honestly, is another recommendation. Alvaro's, and that's Mother.
Okay.
Not that they're similar as far as plot or anything like that. It's one of those films where it's just, you have to watch it multiple times, and there's, so much of it is open to interpretation, and it's a great conversation starter. You can go back and forth and just analyze it in different ways. So that's really the first thing that I thought of. And then, because I'm on a kick for this right now, I'm just going to throw it out there because it's so damn amazing and we have to mention it. Not related whatsoever in many ways, but Bo Burnham's Inside, which is a comedy special on Netflix right now, is absolutely amazing. It's absolutely incredible. It's not a horror film. But there is a heavy theme about kind of the toxicity and evils of technology, and it's also something that, if you haven't seen it, I've watched it 4 times now, and I'm discovering new things all the time. It's incredibly deep, introspective, and you can analyze it in so many ways. So in that sense, that's kind of what I got out of this whole experience, is that things that are open for interpretation, things that require more than one.
Oh, I really like that, Josh. And when I watched Mother, I think that that's a great connection, that they work on the surface level, but there's also a lot of allegory going on, which is what we spent the last 2 hours discussing, right? Or trying to get underneath. I think just 2 movies that I'll mention. One of them is They Look Like People, which was another indie horror film, I think from 2015, Perry Blackshear. There's some elements that I think if you really enjoyed this, you might get a kick out of that. And then probably my favorite David Lynch film, Lost Highway. There's a couple of things that happen in this film. You have, the scenes. There's a lot of scenes of 2 people wandering around inside a house with this sense of something being really wrong. And they're completely disconnected from one another. And then you also have the role of technology. Like, there's these weird videos on this phone that keep appearing and that cause everything to spiral out of control. In Lost Highway, the couple right at the beginning of the film receives these videotapes of someone inside the house, or they're filmed as though someone was inside the house, just as when, Will gets the message apparently from Carrie's phone, and it looks like someone is sitting on the bed inside the bedroom. So there's, some elements there that I think, if you like that kind of thing, and maybe you're familiar with David Lynch, but not everyone has necessarily seen Lost Highway, that's one. And I'll give you a bonus one. There was a film in 2006. It was an American remake. It was called Pulse, and it had a screenplay by Wes Craven. It was actually a remake of a Japanese film called Cairo. And those horror films have a lot to do with the negative effects of technology and how technology is disconnecting us instead of bringing us closer together. So thematically, I think that lines up with some of the stuff we've been talking about.
Nice
indeed.
All right.
And again, don't forget
next.
though. Well, we can't forget the inspiration, though, for the film. Remember, Joe's apartment is something that is a must-watch.
Absolutely. All right. I'm going to go a little more mainstream. I want to start with The Fly. There's body horror. There's bugs, but it's just a great movie. And I feel like it's become one of those movies that everyone knows about, but nobody I know watches. Like, I never hear people go, "Oh, I rewatched The Fly recently," and blah 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 blah. It's just like one of those things that's constantly in our minds, but it's not always brought up. So I wanted to push that again. And then my second one is Slither. Slither is
a good movie.
I think Slither's pretty in line with this. It's a parasite that comes from a meteor and takes over a guy's body, and he starts changing, and then other people start changing. Yeah. All right, John, what do you got?
Well, you actually cut into my list, so I was like, I'm gonna drop it down to 10. I'm not gonna do that many this time.
Down to 84.
All right, yeah, because you said Slither and The Fly, so I'll jump as far as the first one, and I'll say The Nest. And then, of course, the first Creepshow, especially because of the bug scene that's in one of those stories.
Oh, yeah.
I totally thought of that. Like when all the roaches were going through the halls.
Yep.
It totally took me back to Creepshow. Yeah, that's great.
1922 with Thomas Jane, where he kind of, I hate to say it, but he's kind of the same character where, as Armie Hammer's Will is in this film. The Ritual, Devil, in the Tall Grass, another Stephen King one, Mimic.
Oh yeah,
I was thinking about Mimic.
that's
too,
great. Yeah.
And then for technology, or at least I guess technology connecting to some other thing that's out there, The Ring, and then technology with respect to the horrors that can come as a result of technology and social media. There was a film like 10 years ago called Disconnect with Jason Bateman. He plays a father, and it involves like bullying and pressure from social media, and like it shows how all these people are connected and disconnected at the same time. Or I should say connected through technology, but disconnected from their own humanity and each other's humanity.
Nice.
That's a fantastic recommendation.
Thank you.
All right, so let's bring it back to you two. You want to tell everybody where they can find you online and pick up anything you have coming out, or follow you on social media if it still exists?
I'll just jump in there. Yeah. So, just this year, you guys actually put an ad in the book, but I just did the StokerCon 2021 souvenir anthology for the Horror Writers Association, and that's in limited release. I believe that there might still be a way to purchase a copy of the anthology through the Horror Writers Association, so you can reach out that way. But that was a really neat project to work on. Alvaro has an awesome essay in the book, and again, you guys had you were one of the sponsors for the book. Did you get your copy? Did you see it yet?
I have not.
Same here.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I will look into that for you. And then additionally, the later this year, Hex is putting out its next anthology called Shadow Atlas: Dark Landscapes of the Americas, which features an incredible table of contents. Josh Mallerman, Lee Murray, Jane Yolen, a number of others, and Alvaro as well. So that'll be out this October.
Oh, cool! I really liked the last anthology, so I'm looking forward to that.
Thanks. Yeah, it's going to be a good one.
So as far as my work, I have a couple of things Josh just mentioned. I have short stories coming out in a number of venues. Forthcoming short fiction in Vastarian, 2 stories coming out in Analog, a fantasy story coming out in Beneath Ceaseless Skies, and my first non-genre story, which is going to be coming out in an anthology about femme fatales, which is scheduled for 2022, and that's edited by Maxim Jakubowski. But I actually wanted just to take the remainder of my time to bring up a quick little story that was in the news that I found extremely disturbing, and I think fits with everything that we've been talking about. There is another, so the filmmaker of Wounds, Babak Anvari, by the way, I should also recommend his earlier, his first feature, Under the Shadow. That's a great horror, slow burn, just like Wounds. There is another Iranian filmmaker whose name is Babak Horamdin, and this has not really been reported in the news a lot internationally that I've seen, but there's this incredible kind of investigation that's going on, and this really gruesome case because his parents actually murdered him and dismembered him and scattered his pieces throughout the city in Tehran. And they were eventually found out, and because he's like somewhat well known. And as part of their confession, they actually revealed that 3 years before they did the same thing with their daughter, Arizu, and 10 years before they had done the same thing with the son-in-law, Faramar. So I just think that that's kind of crazy that happened, and I haven't seen a lot of people talking about it. It's extremely disturbing, but it's another Iranian filmmaker named Babak. So I thought, you know what? Let me just randomly mention this at the end of the podcast and leave everybody on a really depressing, sour note.
No, our listeners are going to like run out, find that, post it all over social media, and you're going to bring a ton of attention to it.
Yeah,
so
most definitely.
Because I know I'm going to go Google it as soon as we're done. So, All right. So I suppose that wraps it up then. So let me thank you both for coming back. Obviously, I had a great time with the first one, and I've been dying to have you both back and do this again. So the invitation's always open if you two want to come back. You can even come separately if you want and just talk smack about each other. It doesn't matter. So however you want to do it.
Well, thanks for having us. It was fun.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, this was such a blast.
And I think that it legitimately changed. At least I'll go all out. It changed every one of our minds about this film in some way, and I feel confident saying we all want to watch it again with this conversation in mind. So I can't ask for anything better than that. I can't wait to play pool at your bar.
Keep it clean, please. Keep the roaches out.
All right, so that wraps it up for this week. As always, I am James Sabata.
And I'm Don Guillory.
And we will see you back here at thenecronama.com.